Hey everyone, it is a special edition of Clear Your Clutter Inside and Out. I was interviewed about holiday decluttering and organization and starting right for the new year. So I thought that I'd create a bonus episode. Does your clutter own you? On Clear Your Clutter Inside and Out, we'll teach you how to become aware of your clutter along with action steps to declutter and create the life you desire. Come on, let's get started. I was interviewed by MiaJohnson on the show right now, which is on alternative Thursdays, 11:30 to noon Pacific Standard Time at KWMR.org. So that's KWMR.org, which is West Marin Community Radio. I'm a huge fan of independent podcasters like myself and independent stations. So check them out. Again, that's KWMR.org.
Good morning. You are listening to Right Now, a short and sweet morning show coming to you every other Thursday morning from 11:30 to noon. I'm your host, MiaJohnson, and today my guest is Julie Coraccio, and Julie is a professional organizer, author, speaker, and certified life coach whose focus is recognizing and clearing clutter in folks' lives, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. Lots of clutter around the holidays, and you contacted me about this because I was curious about how to maximize the holidays for folks. So thanks so much for joining, Julie Coraccio. Welcome to KWMR.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here.
Absolutely. This is my first on Zoom, on video interview at home. So it's so nice to see your face, your smiling face. So where are we reaching you today, Julie?
In Wheeling, West Virginia.
West Virginia. And what's the weather like there?
It is unseasonably warm at 55. We've already had snow a few times. This is my hometown where I grew up, and we recently moved back from North Carolina. So I'm thrilled to see the snow. Not everyone else is, but I am.
Nice. We're unseasonably warm here too, but probably a different season. So you are a professional in addressing clutter of all types. How would you describe your work in just a sentence?
I support people in clearing clutter in all areas of their lives so they can create the life that they desire and share their gifts with the world.
And what led you to this?
Well, when I first started my business, I was really focused on organization, and I called my business Healing Through Organization. And meanwhile, I was interviewing people, doing a show, and then I had this client who said, "Hey, can we just talk?" And I was like, "It's okay. It's, your dime." And what I realized after that session was it was more important to clear the clutter, because technically you can organize clutter, but it was more important to clear it and then worry about the organization later.
Absolutely. And it seems like there's a lot of different fields of thinking about that. And I'd love to get into that later. But I'm curious, I feel like everyone has different messages about clutter, about cleanliness, about organizing from an early age. Do you remember any messages when you were young about how to keep your stuff and how to organize it?
No, I was an uptight kid. And so my parents were a little bit disorganized, and it really bothered me being late for anything. And so that's because my mom was disorganized, couldn't find the car keys, whatever, got the schedule. And so then that made me organized. I'm like, I don't want to be late. I don't want to be late for practice. I don't want to get in trouble. So that's really where it started for me.
Did you have the organized pencil case?
I do not. I do not.
So you are a life coach, professional organizer, speaker, and author. Can you talk a little bit about the life coaching aspect?
Sure. So again, that kind of came with that client. And I found that I talked about a moment ago. And I found that working with people, coaching automatically came up because I wanted to get what's underneath the clutter. What's it really about? And for most of the people I work with, there's some kind of connection to it. So because I want people clear the clutter, then move forward. I don't want it to come back a year or two. And if we get to the root cause, then we can release it and move forward.
So you work with different forms of clutter. What would you say are the major factors that contribute to physical clutter?
Fear of needing something someday. That is really huge for people. Scarcity, believing that they won't have abundance come back. And if they let it go, will something be there to fill the place? Filling a void of something that's not physical and it's trying to meet a need. So I'd say off the top of my head, those three.
Absolutely. And people hear a lot about hoarders, which is not what you're talking about. You're talking about the everyday clutter, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. The
Absolutely.
everyday clutter, which most of us have.
Absolutely. And have you had clients where you said, you know what, this is something bigger. This is a bigger problem.
I had that happen only once because what I typically do is a 15-minute consultation to kind of get an idea. And I trust my instincts. Very important to me to trust my intuition. And so one person, only it's happened once, lied to me over the phone. And the first thing out of his mouth is, I'm not a hoarder because on the website it says if you have 18 inches from the wall and I only have 17. So, what are you going to do? So the good news was we had a session. I found she had needed something desperately and we found it. And I said, you need someone with a little more experience and who focuses on that. So pretty good batting average.
So what's the sequence when you talk to someone about physical clutter? What's next?
And then if we talk about physical clutter, then I have them fill out an assessment because I like to ask some questions and see what their responses are, because usually that's going to tell me a lot. And then I can hit the ground running, have a plan, and then we meet and then go forward from there.
And what's the most fun part of the process for you in terms of physical clutter work?
Seeing relief on clients' faces, seeing their aha moments is even greater when they make that connection. I'll share a really quick story. I had someone who had this giant stack of papers. I'm like, well, what's up with this? And she said, oh, those are clippings that I'm sending to people, recipes or saw in a magazine. And so as we talked, I said, okay, let's dig a little bit deeper on this. And she made the connection. If I don't send these clippings and keep in touch with people, they aren't going to love me. As soon as she voiced that, she knew that was false, pitched it into the recycling bin. But she came, people have the wisdom within. I see my job as pulling that out and helping them find their own wisdom.
And you've talked about decluttering first and then getting organized. Can you talk about the importance of the sequence?
Well, I believe that it's important to declutter, because if you get organized and still have the stuff, you still have clutter, in my view. I mean, if you have a bunch of stuff and are overwhelmed, think for a moment, if you're in a space that's super cluttered and then one that isn't, you can literally feel that difference. So even if it's organized and a bunch of stuff, and let's not forget, you have to maintain that. You have to keep that up. That takes time, money, and effort. I don't know about you, but I'm trying to simplify my life and have less to do.
I'm talking to Julie Coraccio about clutter. And what about the holidays? Can you talk about what happens in people's lives around the holidays and how to avoid some of the pitfalls when it comes to clutter?
Sure. So I think one of the biggest things that I would say is that people become overwhelmed during the holidays. We have this manufactured, oh, the holidays are this lovely, great time. And that's not true for everyone. And so what I think is really important at the beginning of the holidays, what matters most to you? Do a little planning. What do you love about this time of the season? What have you done that you hate, that you've done out of obligation? What is it that you'd like to try? So that kind of sets the stage. We focus on what we really want, what we really like to check out, and what we don't want to do. And for me, everything kind of flows from there, because, it can really easily create holiday clutter if we have a lot of stuff. I know people who have 5,000 different places to hide their gifts and then forget it. And where did I put it? And then discover that they already brought it, and that's spending time and money. If you get really emotional around the holidays and don't have a plan, like I know when I get upset, I eat emotionally. So I have to be really aware and pay attention for things like that. So I think it really starts with the planning, and that is the first step that you can do that's going to support you to have happy holidays.
And in terms of planning, are you a paper list type of a person? Is it more of a brainstorm? What do you encourage folks to do that really you find is the most effective?
It really is going to depend on them individually. I'm old school. I like to write it down. I get a thrill to cross off everything off my list. I like to plan. I have a big old planner here. But, people who are more technology savvy might want to use some apps to get organized. They're great apps like to organize your gift giving or your budget or whatever. I'm less of a fan of hybrid, because if we've got a paper planner and I've got something on the computer and I've got an app, then things tend to fall through the cracks and you lose something.
Then you have to organize your organizational elements.
Exactly.
Then it starts to be
Exactly.
a big old vortex.
Yes. And something
Um,
gets lost or sucked in.
how do you deal with the concept that, not talking from personal experience, except actually I am, people who like to organize and it becomes all they're doing and they're not doing the work, if that makes sense. Or they're
So do you,
not, yeah, like they're like focused on the organizing, but they're not actually utilizing the things that they're organizing. Like, how can you make it really, really practical? Like focusing on the practical.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I think that's just as unhealthy if you're spending all your time organizing and then you're not living life. We're here to live life, to have joy and do all that. And so that's where you kind of have to relax your standards a little bit. I always think of that funny when Everybody Loves Raymond and the mom has the couch covered in plastic. And then she's like, I'm flexible. I can take off the plastic. And the guys are like, oh my gosh, we're actually sitting on the couch. Is this okay? And so, you don't want to be that uptight about everything. And so do it so it works enough. Can you find what you need when you need it? When you walk into your house, can you feel peace? Because if everything's super organized, I wouldn't feel I don't have labels for everything. Not everything's color coordinated. And that's not a slam against people who are. But again, that goes back to maintaining everything. Can you find what you need? Do you have peace? Those are the things to concentrate on. And you know what? Good enough is good enough. It's not about perfection. And one of the things that frustrates me is I see these shows and it's like, hey, if you are a big Hollywood person and have $1 million budget, have at it. But that's not realistic for most of us.
So, talking about other folks who do organization or have techniques, do you have any inspiration? Do you have any fields that you really like? A book that really helped you find your niche?
I really like feng shui, and really like, I don't own a lot of shoes. I spend money on personal growth. So that's really where I've taken a lot of my stuff. I haven't read any of Marie Kondo's stuff, but I saw an interview with her and she talked about gratitude. I'm like, you're speaking my language. And she had great energy. So she's someone but again, you know, I know a lot of people who couldn't do that method. I can't. I was like, well, I was thinking today, I have this awesome coat hanger, a coat tree to put all my coats. Do I love it? I don't know. Does it bring me joy? I don't know if I'd say that, but boy, do I use it. So you have to find what works best for you. And a mistake that people will make is, oh, everyone's doing Marie Kondo, I have to jump on and do that. Well, it works for some people, but not everyone. So you have to find what works for you.
How do you deal with really, really sentimental clients?
Excellent question, because sentimental clutter can be really hard for people to release. First of all, you have to meet people where they are. My mom died a couple months ago and after a long illness, and my dad's like, let's go through everything. I'm like, slow your roll, Big J. I need some time to deal with this. So first, especially if it's something like that, you need to get to a place when you're ready. I always remind people that our memories are in our hearts and our head. That can never be taken away from us. The challenge is that people will put that memory onto the object. Well, I can't let that table go because it was in my grandmother's house. My grandmother's in my heart. She's in my head. Same with my mom. They haven't gone anywhere. So that's the first thing that I really try to emphasize. And then curate a collection instead of keeping everything. Can you do a cool shadow box? My mom was a painter, and so she painted a holiday card every year. And so I'm going to get those all together. I've got them all gathered and I need to take them down and get them framed. So that's a way that I'm like, every time I look at that, instead of in the file where they currently reside. And so can you curate a collection from something? And if you get in the habit of understanding they are not in the object, they are here in my head and heart, then that makes it a lot easier.
How did you see the last almost 2 years of the pandemic affect your clients, affect your work, affect people's attitudes, and affect people's homes?
It's really interesting because a crisis really tells us who we are and shows us who we are and comes out. I was very strict. I stopped in person. I do virtual organizing, but I just was like, I'm not going to take a chance, because for me, what if I had it and infected anyone? I couldn't have done that. And so a lot of people really were like, oh, wow, I have time on my hands and I don't have that hour commute each way every day. I lived in Los Angeles. I get that. So some people really stepped up and said, hey, I want to do this. Other people, kind of retreated into their shell and kind of it magnified being overwhelmed. Whereas other people's like, I can do this. I've got the time. Other people, it just made them freeze even more. Our affirmations for decluttering support you in releasing clutter at a deeper level. The meditation begins with focused statements on releasing clutter, followed by powerful positive affirmations for healing, and end with completion statements. The affirmation concludes with a reaffirming meditation exercise to fill where clutter was released. 9 clearing clutter affirmations to choose from. Go to reawakenyourbrilliance.com to learn more.
And I think another thing about the pandemic was the cardboard boxes. Amazon. I had never ordered from Amazon before the pandemic. I ordered so much stuff from Amazon. What's your stance on cardboard boxes? I feel like that's something that just piles up in your house and you think, okay, I'm going to use this. I'm going to organize with this. I'm going to make a project out of this. What's your stance on those pesky cardboard boxes?
That's a great question because we are, most of us do order from Amazon. So one, I always try to get a use before recycle, like reuse it. And so can I give it, like, we just moved. So I posted, hey, moving boxes, come and get them. And so that someone else was moving that could get a use. Now they know on Amazon, they have started the option of get it in fewer boxes. So you can now choose that when you're ordering. I know that there are some companies that now that they, and I apologize, I don't remember the name off the top of my head, but that you can order in a reusable box. So there are people out there trying to come up with the solution, but it's a big deal because that, and I don't know if I don't know if Amazon uses recycled cardboard, but that, I mean, it's a ton of cardboard. And, I think for many of us, the pandemic made us realize, wow, wait, like, look at the smog you could see in LA for the first time in nature and seeing in other places. We were saying, let's reset the button here. And, so Amazon needs to be less wasteful in my view.
Talking to Julie Coraccio. She is an organizational and clutter expert. Can you talk about any other environmental focus that you have in your work and any tips and tricks for folks that might be wanting to declutter in a environmentally conscious way?
Sure. I love to do sustainable organizing and I'm very passionate about it. So one of the things is, well, let's just take the cardboard boxes, for example. I did a little thing, drink wine and get organized. So if you go to the wine store, those are great. If they hold those bottles of wine, like I have some to organize Christmas ornaments. We celebrate Christmas. I can color coordinate them because of different wine boxes. Now, they're stored in the house. I don't want to store cardboard like in the basement or the garage with the elements. I'm a huge fan of repurposing things. A lot of times you have things around your home that you can repurpose instead of going to the Container Store to buy something. So you can always look to repurpose. Get in the habit of rethinking everything. Now that we're kind of coming out of COVID, when you'd go to those, let's go to the big conference and all that junk, they'd give you the little tote, which, hey, reuse a tote, but all those tchotchke things to dust, junk that breaks after 5 seconds, start to say no to that. Say no, thank you. And then say to people, hey, I really like your booth, but could you, have a pencil that I'd use, or could you have a pen made with recyclable material or whatever, or something that is less on the environment, or what, I'd really not like anything, but maybe you can give me 10 tips from your area of expertise. So starting to rethink, repurpose is something that a lot of people can do. And recycle, be aware of the recycling laws in your town. You'd be amazed at how many people, now you're I think in an area where people are probably pretty good about it. I unfortunately am not. And that's one of my things. I'm like, I'm ready to get this town to recycle more. So that's on my to-do list.
You're listening to Right Now. I'm your host, MiaJohnson, talking to Julie Coraccio. And emotional, spiritual, mental clutter. Can you touch on those?
Sure. So mental clutter, think about it, monkey mind, anxious. COVID's a great example. How many of us were anxious or waking up at night worried? So that's what I'm talking about, mental clutter. When you have a bunch of physical clutter, it affects your mind. You can't have mental clarity. So what I like to say a lot is the inner affects the outer. So as you clear your physical space, that's going to help clear your mental mind. Emotional clutter is things like jealousy. It is, how much time, or if you someone that has a knee-jerk reaction and get angry all the time, that's clutter because that's preventing you from living your best life. And then spiritual clutter is things like not being able to forgive because that harms you instead of the person you're angry with. And not having gratitude is another big one for me. So those are just a couple of examples.
And what's your next step once you talk to someone about that? What are some practical things that you encourage clients to do to maintain mental, emotional, or spiritual cleanliness? Or I guess not the right word, but clarity or freedom.
Freedom's a great word. Well, obviously it's going to depend on the individual person. But so for instance, your homework assignment might be say no to 3 people this week, or say no to something that you don't want to do. This is great. We're talking about the holidays now. Say no to that office party you don't want to go to, or, say no to great Aunt Maple's Christmas crunch pie that you always hate, but always get to make her happy. So that would be some examples. Or for emotional clutter, if you get angry that your mom says, "Hey, have you found a boyfriend yet?" How can you turn it around and have a different perspective and think, wow, my mom really loves me. And so that's why she's asking if I'm in a relationship, right? And control your anger and how you view things. Huge fan of having gratitude. We have so much in our lives and so many times we forget that. So doing a daily gratitude practice, and I like to say, do it when you're in the shower, or do it right when you wake up, or right before you go to bed. If you pair it with something like, oh, I'm in the shower, I'm going to say 3 things, or if I'm stuck in traffic, I'm going to say 3 things I'm grateful for. You get into the habit of doing that, you tend to do it more.
And what about physical clutter in terms of follow through once you stop working with folks? Do you find there's techniques that really maintain the good habits?
Great question. Well, one thing that I do is I have their plan, like a clutter control plan. So once I get to know someone, I'm like, oh, a term I like to use is clutter kryptonite. What makes you weak in the knees? For me, leopard print, I got to have it. So I'm aware of it, right? So then I say, okay, take a deep breath. You already, have a pair of leopard print shoes. You're in good shape. So we'll talk about their clutter kryptonite and then come up with a specific plan. So for people in general, I would say clutter, declutter, like at the end of the week, tidy up your space. I go through everything I own every year and encourage my clients to do so. And once you've done a major purge, it will take you no time at all to go through each room and say, oh, I don't need that. And then ask yourself, do you need it? Do you use it? Do you love it? Can you find the information? Books are a big thing for people. That's one of my challenge areas. And so I've said, okay, you get one bookcase, make it work. And so, if it's been sitting there for a while, can someone else get better use out of it?
And do you find it's a lot easier when you're there with them in person, or has it been just as effective virtually?
It really depends on the person, because like we're talking now, if I were to have you move your camera around, and your space looks great, by the way, then I could see, okay, this, that, let me ask you some questions. That's where we're getting stuck.
Absolutely. And how do you deal with people who are overzealous in their goals, especially like around the new year? I feel like people are, I'm going to change everything in my life. Everything's going to be perfect. How do you, again, keep it practical?
Great question. I always encourage people not to concentrate on more than 3 items, because we just can't. And then because a lot of times what happens, we're all excited in the new year, and by February it's faded. And when I was younger, I would make this pretty poster board with all these things I was going to change and all these things I could do. And I'm like, in a couple of weeks it had ended. So that's when I was like, okay, just concentrate on a couple things. And then, life happens. My mother was ill, and I've always said family was my priority. I put my money where my mouth was. Okay, so business is going to just have to lessen, do some virtual stuff. COVID made me say, oh, let's publish some books, like let's be flexible, and what else can we do? And so sometimes, life happens and you just have to go with the flow. But then, if someone's like super strict about it, or if it's a perfectionism, then we're going to have some conversations around that. What's really being perfect about? What are we trying to control here? So that's what I mean by digging a little deeper.
And where can people find your resources, your website, your services, all that good stuff?
At reawakenyourbrilliance.com.
And it sounds like you're doing virtual things. So if someone out in West Marin is interested in that, they can check it out. And finally, in our last few minutes, wanted to ask you both what's most challenging about your work and also what you find most fulfilling about your work.
I'll do the easy one first. What I find most fulfilling is being a support and seeing people have those aha moments, seeing them reawaken their brilliance, seeing them share their gifts with the world, seeing them get more confident. When people bloom and then they see, oh my gosh, all this clutter has been weighing me down and I had no idea. Say probably the most challenging thing for me would be when people are resistant to change. But one thing I've personally done is I believe in setting intentions. And so what has happened is I have people who are ready to do the work. And there's no judgment if someone isn't. It's just, oh, you can do it. I believe in you. And when someone stops cold, I think that just, it makes me sad because you're awesome and you have these gifts. Let's get going.
And if somebody was to look around their house today, or their life, or their mind, or their heart, what's a good place for someone to start if they are ready for change?
They are ready for change. So I would say, ask yourself, is there something driving you nuts? Like you can't sleep because your bed's full of clutter, or do you have a deadline for something? So you're going to have the garage cabinets put in January. Well, we might want to get the garage decluttered. Or, if you're not paying your bills on time, get in that office wherever you're paying your bills and get that decluttered and organized. So ask yourself a couple things, and that's where you can start. I would say for mental, have some kind of mindfulness practice. That can be anything. For some people, it's mowing the lawn is meditative. For spiritual, have a gratitude practice, start working on forgiveness because a lot of us have resentment. And then I'd say emotionally, just be aware, where do you always have the same reaction? Are you always getting sad? Are you always getting angry? And start to do some digging on that.
Right. And anything else that you're excited about in your work going into 2022?
Yes, I am starting a group coaching on Patreon. I've redone that, which I'm super excited. I'm making it affordable. I'm doing with a California organizer, keeping it real classes for those of us who have lives but know that organizing and decluttering would help. My 15th book is coming out, which is a 21-day challenge for if you're really overwhelmed, baby steps to declutter your life.
Great. Well, thank you so much. We've been talking to Julie Coraccio, and that website again, people want to check it out?
Reawakenyourbrilliance.com.
Great. You've been listening to Right Now. I'm your host, MiaJohnson, and I would love to visit West Virginia someday. I've never been there. So thank you so much for making the time this morning to join us and give us some tips going into the holiday and into the new year.
Thanks so much for having me.
Appreciate it, Julie.
Keep subscribed because you never know when I'm going to pop on and have bonus episodes or interview people or do special episodes. Clear your clutter inside and out. It's still going to keep on rolling. Wishing you all a wonderful holiday season, no matter what you celebrate, and may you experience the magic. Clearing your clutter allows you to share your gifts with the world. Get your free self-assessment to discover your clutter priority at reawakenyourbrilliance.com. If you've enjoyed Clear Your Clutter Inside and Out, please rate, review, and share us.